My experience Ivar Hope 132 days ago. Due to privacy reasons, I'll be using only initials for my family. So let's get to it. These experiences are my own and my family's. I have my parents, 2 brothers, and a sister. My oldest brother, P, currently doesn't live with us and hasn't for quite a few years. So it's mostly the 5 of us. We think it all really started when I thought it would be funny to tease my elder sister, T, by drawing a fake Ouija board. Kind of like the Charlie game where you only have to write yes or no on a piece of paper and use a pencil for the spirit to touch and move. Obviously, it wasn't a good idea. Don't get me wrong, I've always have been a believer and so has my family. But I always thought it was the Ouija board itself that you shouldn't mess with. I would soon find out that it wasn't the case at all. So after harmlessly trying to scare my sister, I decided it was best to stop and I took my so-called Ouija board and dunked it into water. It's said that spirits or other sorts of beings can't pass through water since it's pure. Think of it as the headless horseman unable to cross the bridge because of the water underneath it. It's pure. So I basically wanted to take extra measures in case I was wrong about my Ouija board not being like the real one. And not only was I wrong, the water also didn't work. So after that little harmless prank, things started to happen. It first started with my mum. But before I tell you what happened, I'll give you a bit of a visual image of our place. When my parents walk out of their room, you can look to your right and immediately see the living room and balcony. My room that I share with my sister is right across from my parents and the bathroom is right between us when you turn left. It's a small place so my parents rent 2 apartments across from each other to give the whole family enough space. My second oldest brother, A, lives in the other apartment and sleeps alone at night because we close the doors. Now, for the first experience. I don't know exact dates, I just know what part of the day everything happened. It was probably around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when the first experience happened. My mom had to go use the restroom so she got up and headed out of the room. But before she got to the bathroom, my mom saw something out of the corner of her eye. She turned her head, looking at the couch and she saw a glowing figure of a little boy playing with our cat, Mr. Jingles. My mom was in disbelief, so much so she clicked on and off the bathroom light to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. The little boy turned towards her as if he heard the noise then bolted up towards the door which was closed. He literally went through it and disappeared. My cat got up and looked at the door then back at my mom as if he was saying, "You saw that too, right? Animals can see, hear, and smell certain things that a human cannot. Think of it like a 6th sense. But only for animals." We later found out that a little boy had in fact died here. He drowned in the condominium pool that was just downstairs. A few days later my mom has another experience and I'm not surprised. She's always been sensitive to it as she has told me she's lived in a haunted house before. So she goes on telling us that she was lying in bed with her eyes closed yet still wide awake, debating whether or not she wanted to go to the restroom again. That's when my mom senses something there with her. She opened her eyes and saw our dad standing over her and smiling. He reached out to touch her cheek but she quickly ducked under her covers to hide. In the morning, my mom asks why my dad did that and he says, "I didn't do anything. I was asleep for the whole night." That definitely surprised us all. And my mom knew she wasn't dreaming or anything because she remembers being awake for a good amount of time, thinking of whether or not if she wants to go to the bathroom like I said before. A few days later, my family and I had finished making sandwiches for dinner and we went off to watch TV separately. My parents were watching in one apartment together when they hear a loud bang as if something fell. My dad got up and checked it out. It was the bread knife that had fallen. But it couldn't have fallen because it was in the middle of the counter. But how do we know that? We could have easily misplaced it and thought we placed it elsewhere. Well, how we know is that we also used the bread knife to spread mayo on the bread. So looking at the counter, you can see the mayo from the knife smudged and dragged across the counter till it reached the edge of the counter where it eventually fell off. It was definitely creepy to know that whatever was here had enough energy to move an object. Let alone a knife. We've all seen shadows out of the corner of our eyes. I've seen one standing at the door of the apartment in the middle of the night. I brushed it off, thinking it was my dad since it looked big and he was too. Turns out, it wasn't him because I heard him sniffing in his room. So you can imagine my what the heck moment when I put two and two together. My sister has seen white figures dart from room to room. And one time T saw a white face in our doorway, watching her and myself sleeping. T thought it was my mom since, well, she's pretty pale. In the morning, we asked her about it and my mom said she never looked in. Safe to say, we kept our door closed after that. One time, I thought I saw a white figure walk pretty fast into a room that we call the workout room since it's our home gym. My sister saw it too. Then we both heard footsteps on the workout mats that were on the floor. We thought it was, again, our mom since she wears white workout pants. But it wasn't because I went over to the other apartment to see if our parents were still there and they were. A few months ago, P came back to stay so he could find a job then move out again. He was always prone to paranormal stuff, like my mum. It got worse when he started dating his girlfriend and hung around her family. They dabbled in stuff that you shouldn't ever dabble in and P angered what you call here where I lived Wens. They're basically little goblins and he didn't want them bothering his girlfriend or their baby so he cursed at them, angering them and such. Now they bother him only. So, when my brother was living here things escalated for him. There's this black figure here as well. He said it was female and it bothered him a lot. The first night P was here, she stood in the corner of the room watching him get ready for bed. If I remember correctly, he said the same night a little boy was running back and forth in his room as if he was excited that P was here and that he could see them. For several nights, that black figure bothered P. She always stood near him and watched him. He always ignored her but it made him uncomfortable enough that he didn't want to sleep in the workout room anymore and asked A if he could sleep in his room with him. What's interesting is that P said that the spirits here couldn't enter A's room. It was basically protected for some reason and they wouldn't enter it. We found out later that A would always say a prayer before heading to bed. So when my brothers went to bed that night, it was around 3 in the morning when P heard footsteps outside the room walk up to the closed door, stop, and then walk away. He woke A up and asked if he heard it too but A said no. A few weeks passed and my dad had the great idea to encourage me, A, and T to take a recorder into the workout room since it was the most active and to speak to it. And since we all loved paranormal stuff and just wanted to experience actually talking to a spirit, we decided to do it. So when P went to work, we huddled into the workout room around 9 or 10 p.m. and took our recorder out. Now since we live in a country where Spanish is the main language, we contacted the spirit and spoke in Spanish. Most of the audios showed up with nothing. But that was most. We ended up with 3 recordings that chilled us to the bone. And still do to this day. After talking for about 3 or 4 minutes, I stopped recording and told everyone to be quiet so I could listen. Now, note that we closed all windows and doors so no outside noise would interfere with anything. 2 minutes in, I start to hear this low whistling with a tune. I couldn't place my finger on what the tune was but I was just shocked to even hear a whistle at all. I knew it couldn't be from outside because the window was closed and my siblings weren't whistling either. So that was the first. I showed A and T, and they were just as shocked so we decided to continue. And we caught more. In one audio, we caught scratching noises that sounded like something was scratching the mats that we were sitting on. But I know no one was screwing with me because I wanted this to be serious. So that was creepy hearing. Now the third audio really was chilling and made us stop completely. With this being maybe the 5th or 6th attempt of recording, I told my siblings to talk completely in Spanish since we sometimes spoke English. My sister did all the translating and asked these questions. Who are you? What do you want? What's your name? The last question was what triggered something. How old are you? I stopped recording and again silenced the room so I could hear everything without interruption. I listened as the questions were asked, then followed by silence so we could give the spirit or spirits time to answer. When I got to the last question, how old are you? It was silent, then followed by a low but clear whisper saying, tres. The number tres is 3 in Spanish. We stopped messing with it after that. We don't know if that was that little boy or something else imitating a child, because whatever is here has been doing exactly that. Imitating all of us. Heard a voice saying hey and peas. Voice, yet he was at work when that happened. I heard someone talk and it sounded just like my dad, so I walked out of the room to see if he was there. Was in the living room and I asked her if our dad came in, but she said no. We've heard other noises as well. A and T have heard a woman whispering SHH in their ear, and we've heard footsteps. My bedroom door was opened once and I've been touched, as well as my parents. Mr. Jingles passed away back in August of 2018 and we've heard cat meows and I've seen a small animal figure out of corner of my eye. Things have calmed down lately though, not much has happened. P moved out a few months ago and I only hope things are okay with him. So, this is my own and my family's paranormal experiences. I've got plenty stories of P's experiences with the Duende, so let me know if you want to hear those too. And if anything else happens, I'll be sure to update you. Date, 06.15. 2011. Source, Rosario3.com. Argentina, residents or Santiago del Estero, terrified by striking imp. Local residents state that the small creature appears in dark places and pummels people. Police has issued a statement asking people not to walk alone in the dark. Do imps exist? It seems that they do in Santiago del Estero. According to residents of Sancho Corral, there appears to be a creature that hits people. Locals have taken to calling it the dwarf, and police have cautioned people to avoid walking alone at night. The Nuevo Diario de Santiago del Estero newspaper reports that residents of Sancho Corral allege that the imp appears in the pre-dawn hours, adding that it also attacked a child on its way to visit a friend's house. Another local was startled by the creature as he went for a ride in his bike. The creature supposedly wore an enormous hat and had large ears. Further, Juan Cruz Farina of the San Miguel Archangel Church believes that it could be a product of magic, and if so, the church can attempt an exorcism in an effort to expel demons from the possessed body. However, he explained that nothing about this case suggests a possession. It could be many other things, such as fanciful imaginings or confusion by the people of Sancho. I therefore ask everyone to take matters calmly and above all, to have faith in God. There is an explanation to all the phenomena. Paranormal encounter run-in with a Duende/creeped_out years ago. This happened to me about 4 years ago. I was coming home from work one day. It was around 6/6:30, and here in Canada in the winter months it's nighttime at this point. I was driving home, street lights are on and nothing unusual, except as I was leaving work I saw what looked to me like a little boy in my rear view mirror about, I'd say 50 feet behind me in the middle of the parking lot. Kind of strange, but I didn't pay any attention to it, and as I was driving home I saw the same kid, or at that point I thought it was a different kid, about 3 blocks from where my work is, and he was just staring at me as I drove by. I had a slight chill and I tried not to think much of it, but it was creepy. I only live about 7 minutes from my work, so it doesn't take me long to get back home. I didn't see him again until I was about 2 blocks away. This time he was under a street lamp, so I got a better look at this kid, and to my surprise it was not a kid at all. In Mexico we call these creatures duendes. They are usually small fairy-like creatures with the appearance of an old man. Their heights do vary, but I myself have never seen one to be the size of a child. He looked exactly like an old man. As I drove past him about to turn the corner I was freaking out at this point and I just wanted to get home. This thing was following me. As I was on approach to turn the last corner of my house, there he was again. I slammed on my brakes because there it was right in front of my car, just crossing the street. It looked up at me as he was walking past my car and gave me the most evil grin I had ever seen. I was about ready to run him over with my car, but I was frozen in place. As soon as he was on the other side of the street, I gunned it home. But I took one final glance in my rear-view mirror to see if he was still behind me. It was gone. It wasn't on the other side of the street or anything. I didn't care, but I was so frightened. I got home, got out of my car and looked around to see if it was nearby. I was fortunate enough not to see it again. I made sure to look down the street both ways before going into my house. I got in, locked the door, closed the curtain and tried to forget what I saw. Even my wife knew something had spooked me. I didn't tell her till the following day. I didn't want to scare her at the time. I hope I don't see it again. Paranormal unexplained duendes, goblins, If I hope 132 days ago. Due to privacy reasons, I will be using initials for the names of any family member. So, I've posted my paranormal experiences on here before and thought I'd post my older brother's experiences he has had with duendes, aka Mexican-styled goblins. Courtesy to Wikipedia, duendes are creatures from Iberian, Latin American, and Filipino folklore. They could be very mischievous or nice. Really depends on your actions towards it. They can dwell in the woods or even in your house. It's said that they can live in your walls as well. But now that I explained a little bit on duendes, let's get into the experiences. So, my oldest brother, P, moved out 3 or 4 years ago. When he did live with my family and me, he never had any problems with these goblins. Only when he got mixed up with people who did that, they attached to him. The first experiences of his started when he lived with a friend, E. That friend of his told him to be careful because he was having issues with duendes, but P scoffed at it, not really believing in it. But as days went on, he started to. His keys would go missing and he'd find them in places he never put them. He would hear little pitter-patter of footsteps running in his room, even going as far as running under his bed and hitting it. His closet door has opened up when it was fully closed as well. Soon after, he moved out and met his current girlfriend, L. And unfortunately for him, her family had the same goblin problem. L's family's duende problem all started when her mother mocked a witch. Something you should never do whether you believe it or not. Respect should always be there. So that witch cursed her and her family with duendes. They terrorized them for many years by knocking on walls, taking things, running around and just being evil little things. But there's this one duende that bothers my brother to his core. He has even seen it, and his girlfriend's family actually had caught a picture of it, but they deleted it out of fear it would hurt them. This duende was small with sharp teeth that always was smiling. Believe it or not, he actually wears a top hat as well. When P told me all of this, I was skeptical, but who am I to say someone's experience isn't real? I have my own experiences that are unexplainable, so what makes others not real? He told me on one occasion. He was sleeping with L in their room, and my brother is pretty tall, so his foot slightly hangs off the bed. P was trying to get to sleep when he felt a sharp thing that felt like a fingernail run down his foot. He got up, wide-eyed and heart beating fast. P knew it was the goblin messing with him. A few days later, it was after he had dinner that he went out for a smoke. L's dog followed him out and they sat on the porch step when the dog went crazy out of nowhere. She jumped up and ran at this tree, barking and growling for absolutely no reason. P was calling out to her, asking her what was wrong when he heard rustling the tree branches. So, he looked up and there was that smiling duende, moving leaves aside and looking at him. My brother immediately grabbed his dog and went inside. Then there was a bang on the door when he closed it. He believes he locked it out because the rest of the night was calm. My brother has a little girl and she was started to get bothered by these things, so one day he had enough. He yelled and cursed at them and that angered them. They bothered him even more, leaving his girlfriend and daughter alone. Those are all the stories that I know of so far. I've tried helping before by researching and learning about them. I actually found a drawing of the Duende with the top hat. I showed my brother it and he said it looked exactly like the one he sees. I don't know whether or not these Duendes still bother him to this day, but I hope they don't. If I learn any more, I'll post again. r/paranormal tales from the old country as told by my relatives. You Spuntipk part 4 years ago. So a quick background. I am of Mexican descent, and in our culture, the dead and spirits are a big part of our culture as seen by Dia de los Muertos. Now as a kid, my family would always share ghost stories from the old country in Mexico. I would like to share a few if you want to read. This one is from my grandma. She states that she was a little girl. She saw the devil himself. Back then circa 1940s, many families were poor, and I mean very poor. She lived in a poor village in Guerrero, and to go to the bathroom, you needed to take a nice trip into the forest, even at night. In pitch darkness with only the stars and moon to guide you. She was peeing, and when she walked back home, she heard what sounded like a parade of horses coming her way. Of course that was not possible as it was complete darkness and no one traveled the roads at that time. She saw a figure on top of a single horse, not many, and said he did not look up, just told her something and kept going, and then shortly disappeared. When she arrived home, her mother saw all her hair standing up. This in her village meant contact with an evil presence. Another story, she encountered the famous weeping woman La Llorona, in a similar situation while out in the woods at night. She said a woman half white and half shadow was walking down a dirt road while crying and giving out loud laments. She could not see her face and seemed to not have any legs floating. This is from my mother and father. In Mexico and other places in Latin America, there are many accounts of duendes, gnomes and evil nature spirits such as gnolls, shapeshifters, Chaniks, forest imps, and Hadas, fairies. My mother told the story of her sister who had a baby daughter. One night, my aunt was sleeping. They live in a village where forests are your backyard, and she said she saw a little child walk around and making noise. She had a young son, but he was sleeping in his room. The girl was newborn and could not walk yet, so she had no idea who this child was. She called the child, thinking it was her son, and it ran towards her room and under her bed. When she looked down getting ready to scold this child she thought was her son playing in the late hours of the night, there was nothing there. In Mexico, it is believed that gnomes can kill and take the soul of children. This almost happened to my father. He was at his grandmother's house playing in the yard. He was a kid, and she had many trees. When suddenly he saw a bunch of naked children on the treetop calling his name and gesturing him to climb up. He told his grandma if he could play with the kids, but of course she saw nothing up there and held him inside because she knew what it was. She said some prayer, completely freaking my dad out, and said he was not allowed to play there again. In another instance though, unfortunately, he was playing with his baby cousin sitting in a baby chair, when suddenly his cousin just dropped her head like she went to sleep and was dead just like that. My dad called over his aunt, and when examining her, they found marks on her neck as if she was strangled by an unseen force. My mother said that her father and a neighbor were enemies. But there was something about this neighbor that scared the locals. There were many rumors and claims that he was a gnoll. This is so because when that home was sold, they found hidden within a book of spells, witchcraft and Satanism, and had gnoll-related entries. Finally, the last story to tell, it involves ghosts from the Mexican Revolution. My mother was a young girl. This is basically a repeat of my grandmother's story. She went out to use the bathroom in the late hours of the night when she looked up and saw a man dressed in revolutionary clothes sitting on a rock. No one was out at those times. He had an old Mexican Revolution type sombrero and just looked in my mom's direction, but he had no face, just a silhouette. She got up as fast as she could and ran back inside. It is said in her village that a Mexican revolutionary guerrilla soldier was executed in that spot, hung from a tree. This was common in the time as most revolutionaries were either hung or had a firing squad shoot at them as execution. Thanks for reading. If you made it this far, Just wanted to share some paranormal stories passed down in my family. r/paranormal experience my mom hates sharing. U/casual view 1232. Why my mom is in her early 60s now and I always make her recall an experience she and sister had when they were children. She hates it lol, but it's one heck of an experience. When she was around 9 or 10 years old, she shared a room and a bed with her sister who was about 2 or 3 years older. One night, they were falling asleep when they both saw what she describes a little man, tiny person sitting in the corner. It was dark but they could clearly make out this thing just hunched on its haunches in the corner like a scolded child. They were kids, not scared at all, and gestured for the entity to play with them. She said the thing jumped on the bed and they all proceeded to rouse together, having a fat laugh as they tossed the little entity about. Eventually they got bored and chased the entity off. It went right back to corner it came from and sat on its haunches, looking depressed. But my mom and her sister just called it a night and went to sleep. To this day mom says she and her sis do not know what that was, but it was not too out of the ordinary as they were used to all things ghostly where they grew up. All I can remember her saying is that it was about 3 feet tall. She also thinks it might have something to do with an orphanage that closed down the many years before this. Apparently a lot of kids had a tough time there. Story always creeps me out. r/paranormal Duende. Caffeine through if 2 years ago when I was younger my family lived in the Philippines and supposedly I had some sort of experience with those little thingies when my siblings and I were playing in our garden. Apparently I accidentally hit one of them and I guess they were angry at me and we were instructed by the voodoo doctor to give them food offerings so they would stop haunting me. My uncle swears hearing high-pitched voices at our dining room where the offering was. Anyways, do you guys know if they can do some sort of magical spells or whatever, because I've had really bad luck these past couple of years. I don't know if that has anything to do with those things but somehow thought about that experience while getting high. Ha ha ha. El Duende/comic_star5. Why I grew up mostly in the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico. I'm not of Hispanic descent, but have been told numerous times of a gnome named El Duende. Either my friends or their family have told me of the story. Apparently he is a troll that will come out at different times in a Hispanic household. He likes to mess with the children or scare them. I went to my friend Roman's house one night. He had told me of this phenomenon and I never actually believed it. That was until El Duende actually appeared in his front yard. We were playing outside and there goes a gnome shadow. My friend actually tried going after it, but I was too freaked out by the incident. After we couldn't see it anymore he just laughed it off as it were a normal everyday experience. I was over again a year or so later. This time I was just about to fall asleep in his room when out of the corner of my eye comes this gnome shadow right into the room. It ran a path to the window and disappeared. I still had my suspicion for many years. Was someone messing with me? Or was this the infamous El Duende? I am a lot older now and I still hear of the story. One night I was sitting alone in my house, when I saw a shadow run by my windowsill and jump toward the ground. It ran around and even went behind furniture to come out on the other side. I said to myself, dang that El Duende. What didn't make sense to me was that I don't live in a Hispanic household and my girlfriend is not of Mexican descent either. I have been very confused and I still catch glimpses of this troll. Has anyone else experienced this? What type of explanation could there be? Does El Duende wander your home? What types of stories were you told of El Duende? From the stories I was told, this is a troll that wanders Mexican households. No one of any other race has mentioned this to me ever. I have also watched the show Fact or Faked where they show a video of some children freaking out over a gnome shadow. This is where I was reintroduced to the gnome. The gnome in the video looks just like the one I have seen. Now he lurks my house.